Hello, a gory and spooky hello to this special episode about a special title, Birdcage of Horrors, or Graon no Torikago, if my Japanese doesn't escape me, which almost definitely does. Anyway, this is something quite amazing and unique, because although Birdcage of Horrors is on the SEGA Dreamcast, it isn't a game. In fact, it isn't really anything like anything you've ever seen before. It's an incredible multimedia horror that's somewhere between a film and a series. It was called an iDra, which is internet drama, but it doesn't really tell you anything about it. So we're going to have a try. It was a trailblazer and unique and wonderful, and you really must experience it. It was uniquely Japanese, and in fact, unique full stop. I think I've said unique about 50 times and we've only just started, because it was doing something as a media experience that no one's ever reproduced. I don't think they've done it before, I don't think they've done it since. It really stands alone. And you know what? It's not just fascinating, it's bloody enjoyable as well. It's scary, and it's weird, and it's intriguing, and it's really, really watchable. And the story of Birdcage, the history, is every bit as good. So we're going to look at both, because this crazy piece of Sega magic mixed big name Japanese producers with hammy ex-porn stars. There's links in it to John Lennon, to the Tokyo Olympics, to the Disney film Wreck-It Ralph. Shocking storylines decades ahead of their time, B-movie schlock and gore that veers wonderfully between brilliant and laughable, and at its heart, Sega once again doing something bold and brave and new and fascinating, even as they entered the final roll of the console dice. Birdcage of Horrors is going to entertain and bewilder you in equal measure, and in this video, there'll be stuff for everyone. Whether the whole thing's new to you and you've no idea what this weird Japanese curiosity is about and you just need to know the basics, or even if you've watched it, because we've unearthed some proper gems in the project's history that'll have you gasping. We'll cover the project, what it is, how it was released, and how you actually watched it. We'll talk about its cast and the array of crazy histories that make the backstory almost as great as the program, and we'll talk about whether it's actually any good and how it ranks as an actual bit of entertainment, and we'll cover the most important thing, how you can go and watch it for yourself, because you really, really should. And we'll kind of start there with a huge nod to the brilliant Derek Pascarella, who's made it possible to watch it by translating, modding and packaging the whole massive thing into an obtainable project and then making it available on his website. All the key bits of it, we'll tell you about it in a minute. If you're in the retro community, you'll probably have come across Derek's work, also released under the name A-Team, because he's translated and patched or modded a huge array of classic titles. And Derek and the work of all his fellow modders, translators and homebrew creators is sort of another pillar of the amazingness of this project, because the very fact that 25 years after its release there are still people selflessly carrying on the work and making these things available to the whole world is just marvellous. He's one of the true pillars of the community, and you know, he's a properly nice and approachable guy. He doesn't ask anything in return for all his amazing work, which is all the more reason we should support it. So I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to find your way over there to chuck that legend some support. You'll also find links to the Birdcage work on Derek's site, and more details on watching it will be at the end of this vid. So, okay, we promised it, so let's do the basics. What the hell is Birdcage of Horrors? There'll be plenty of you that had no idea this project existed unless you stumbled across it on the internet or saw the recent buzz around it when Derek released the English translation. And even if you knew the name, it's quite possible you'd never experienced it for yourself. So here's the first thing. Even though it's on the Dreamcast, it's not a game. It's a horror or mystery film. It's a film about a girl, Nao Tsunoda, who gets embroiled in a horrific game of murderous cat and mouse. But more on the plot later, because as a project, the plot isn't the best bit, because this film was released in the most enigmatic, eye-catching way, 1 minute at a time, in 365 episodes that became available, one per day, for a year. every time unveiling a little more of the plot, and almost every time leaving you on a cliffhanger or a gory jump scare or just something brilliant. And I say in that sentence it became available quite deliberately, because to get each episode you had to be super committed and go through multiple stages. We're talking hoops after hoops. First off, you had to buy the discs. There were 6 of them, 6 GD-ROMs released exclusively through the Dreamcast Direct service that would later then become SEGA Direct after Dreamcast passed on. The discs themselves were sold only for 3 months, between July 1999 and September 1999, and it was those that held the recorded episodes. But even then, once you'd been and bought them in that 3-month window, you still couldn't watch Birdcage. Because to get each instalment, you needed to log on daily to Dreamcast Direct and download a special save file to your VMU. Only once you had the save file downloaded, and only once you'd watched the preceding episode, would the next one be available to you. That service on Dreamcast Direct ran from October the 1st, 1999 to October the 1st, 2000. And I mean, this was a crazy, infuriating, brilliant piece of marketing that, by the accounts that we've read, made huge waves and had people hooked. Though we did hear a lot of people didn't make it to the end and bowed out and didn't keep up with it, and I get that. But that all just kind of adds to the mystery and exclusivity of the whole project, as did the fact that soon after that final episode became available on October the 1st, 2000, the servers went offline forever. Now, while it was live, you could also log on to the internet site to go to Sega's partner in this, ASCII, who were running a website at the same time where you could also watch it. So you didn't have to do it on your Dreamcast at all, in fact. You could go onto their website, you could become a member, and you could watch the episodes daily on there. But the daily thing was still the case. You couldn't jump ahead, you couldn't cheat, and of course if you watched it on the internet, you also didn't have a copy of it. Now, while we were researching this video, we also found that it was released on VHS, and oh my god, I'd love to own those. They are on auction sites in Japan, and they just look very cool, but no doubt they cost an absolute fortune, so I won't be doing it. But it was available in other ways, but it was still so exclusive, and so rare and so random. What I loved about it was that Birdcage itself wasn't just about the marketing. It was about the fact this was an experience designed to get you online with your Dreamcast, using your VMU and watching film in relatively high def, for the era anyway. It was a showpiece. It was modern tech with modern ideas, and there was nothing else like it. Hell, I mean, has there ever been anything like it? Your head, hearing it now, might immediately go to, say, Bandersnatch, Charlie Brooker's Netflix horror that lets you interact and you can choose one of multiple paths through the show. And in terms of defying the genre or using tech to enrich and reinvent the experience, it's a good comparison, but the differences are kind of more telling. This wasn't a media giant like Netflix is today. This was the games producing Sega. This wasn't the high-speed internet-enabled modern world. This was 1999. It was simply astounding that Sega would take on a project like this. Wait, to invent a project like this. The film action alone is over 6 hours long, and then there's the infrastructure and organising and promotion of it, and as we'll talk about in a bit, the people they got to be involved with it. I mean, this was a huge undertaking. As well as the fact that Sega's partners, ASCII Entertainment, ran that supporting website at the same time that backed up and teased elements of the plot. I mean, this was Sega being inventive and brave and imaginative. In truth, this was Sega being kind of crazy. Being kind of crazy in the type, in kind of the way, with the attitude that made them who they were in the 90s, in the Nakayama era, in their golden era. Can you imagine Sega Sammy going anywhere near something like this? The play it safe, churn your IP, don't take chances Sega of 2024 wouldn't dare. But then no one would. And isn't that something fantastic? So let's talk a little bit about the thing they actually created. Not too much, because I want this video to be spoiler free, so you hopefully go off and watch Birdcage for yourself afterwards. But we'll talk enough to give you a taste of what it's about and what happens. We've already mentioned now Sonoda. Well, just before Sonoda-san joins the show, we meet a shady businessman in a gloomy office. Some faceless sap is sat before him, pen poised over a contract. He's clearly afraid and angry, and we learn this same contract has gone to 10 people in heavy debts who must sign up to live in the Grauenheim, or literally horror home or home of horrors. Random bit of German, love it. And though the shady businessman insists that no one is being made to kill, the contract makes clear that they can only leave when 5 are left, at which point their debts will also be forgiven. So, in other words, the contract totally makes it clear that it requires you to kill or be killed. Now Sonoda, though, is just an innocent young girl. She's got no debts, and when we meet her, she's shown laughing and joking with her teenage school friends. She's carefree, innocent, knows none of this. But sadly, Nao's father is embroiled in the whole thing somehow, and Nao seemingly joins the horror house as his stand-in. And that's enough. I won't give more away, and don't worry, all this is just early preamble stuff, but fair to say that what follows is, and I don't think we'll call this a spoiler, lots of gory deaths. Gory and imaginative deaths, with the nature of the killing and the grotesque ways the bodies are found, all perfectly framed to keep you downloading those save files. But the film is also a mystery, because early on, Detective Goda joins the fray, and between him and Nao and her friend Tetsu Takamura, they try to work out what the hell is going on. Both elements are pretty fantastic. The horror, it's gruesome, it's inventive, it's brutal enough to shock and it's slightly offend, but it's cheesy enough to be enjoyable and sometimes funny. And though the mystery drama is a bit clunky, with the production values of something kind of like a horror version of Neighbours from the 90s, it does get its hooks into you, and you want to know, you care, you want to know, you want to find out what happens. Mysteries surround all the characters, not least Nao and her father, and everyone in the Grauenheim is a suspect. We know the contract obliges this motley crew to turn murderous, so everything carries a macabre edge. Even when the people in the building are being deliberately ridiculous or comedic, it all has a dark angle to it that you can feel lurking behind their every line. In fact, you'll probably pick up the same dark kind of echoes that I have with the links between financial desperation that we mentioned of all these characters that leads into some kind of murderous challenge and weird competition angle, seemingly quite like the much later South Korean drama Squid Game, the massive Netflix hit. There are even faint similarities with the fight-to-death nature of, say, Battle Royale that was released around the same time, and that also kind of built on a foundation of economic depression with teenagers at the heart of the drama. But the point is less that these are similar things, and more that Birdcage of Horrors aims similarly big. I mean, this storyline is dark and sinister, where you think it might hold back because Sega were already out on this massive limb. Instead, it pushes even further, right into bizarre and outlandish territory. To be honest, it goes further than a lot of games do, a lot of horror games, and it couldn't be further from the blue skies high-res sheen of the Dreamcast game catalogue. This is gritty, nasty, horror-filled stuff. If it's occasionally a bit silly, I love it. And it's the fact that this is such an out-there piece of film, presented in such an out-there media format, that makes it all the more amazing who they dragged in to put it together. Because if you thought for a second that they got the admin boys in Sega HQ to play dress up, you'd be wrong. There are some fascinating people involved in this project. Now look, let's start with the big guns, and that's got to be the director, Yasushi Akimoto. He might not be a household name in the West, but Akimoto-san is an absolutely blockbuster music mogul in Japan. Think Simon Cowell, but with less high-waisted jeans and more multi-million selling records. Akimoto-san is a music producer, author, lyricist, sometime director and producer, who's written hundreds of songs and books. His most famous acts are a girl band called AKB48, who are absolutely gigantic, or were, though possibly their most famous hit in the West was the theme song Sugar Rush from the Disney film Wreck-It Ralph. And Akamoto wrote that bad boy. And just a few years ago at the Tokyo Olympics, Yasushi Akamoto was the head producer of the opening ceremony. He was their Danny Boyle. And he was also a director on the overall Olympic committee. I mean, this guy is huge. And back in 1999, there he was, directing an offbeat project on the SEGA Dreamcast. Still, if you want offbeat, try Detective Goda, the grizzled detective who comes in to investigate the deaths in the Groundheim that we mentioned earlier. Well, Goda is played by Kiyoshi Watanabe, who, before Birdcage came along, was basically better known for starring in Pink movies, which are basically pornos. And that seems to be a theme, because the first victim in the House of Horrors is a fearful older lady called Eriko Shimizu, played by Kaoru Sugata. Sugata-san had a long career as a TV actress, but was also very famous for releasing one of the first hair nude books. Hair nudes were, as you might guess, naked photos, where you can see a lady's furry thicket. But our interest isn't in the nudie pics, for once, but the fact that Sugata's pics were part of a cultural revolution in Japan. It was big news, and even bigger because her pics were taken by Norinobu Shinuyama. He was a hugely famous figure because he founded the All Japan Hair Exposure Federation. Yep, that's a real thing, the All Japan Hair Exposure Federation. And that spearheaded the hair nude boom. Yes, there was a hair nude boom. Shinuyama-san is also doubly famous because he, separately I should add, took the very last photo of John Lennon and Yoko Ono before Lennon was tragically killed. Shinuyama was taking photos for two of their albums that the pair made together, and his picture of the couple was shown around the world in the wake of Lennon's death. Now remember, all these people are linked to the making of a movie on the SEGA Dreamcast. Shinuyama-san crops up again in a minute in relation to our leading lady, but before we get to her, I just have to mention Zenichiro Immoral Iwata, a character played by Pepe Hozokoshi, and who always appears on screen in a luchador wrestling mask, and who we find out is famous for his signature move of basically grappling his opponent by the gyozas, which is brilliant and perfectly apt because Pepe, in real life, after a career of bit parts in TV and on the Birdcage, went on to open a gyoza restaurant in the early 2000s. Tasty. So that just leaves our lead, now Tsunoda, played by a young actress called Saka Yoshino. Yoshino-san wasn't globally famous, but at the time was a real celebrity in Japan. She was one of Japan's first child idols, after having appeared as a younger girl in a beautiful art house film called Maborosi, or A Trick of the Light. A properly beautiful film, appeared in the UK in a BFI film festival. It went to Venice and won awards. It's really quite something, you should look it up. It's a famous piece of cinema, and she played the younger self of the main lead. After that, Yoshino-san became something of a regular in girls' magazines, posing for photo shoots for Norinobu Shinuyama, there he is again, in something called the Monthly Panja and lots of other periodicals. Monthly Panja seemed to be a bit of a sort of grotty mag featuring younger girls in swimming costumes and things like that, not nude, but generally kind of bending over or showing off bits of their body. Yoshino-san herself also became quite famous for appearing on talk shows and speaking her mind to the host and other guests. She is often referred to in headlines as the outspoken one or the sharp-tongued one or things like that. Birdcage would have been just at the start of her peak, just as SEGA was reaching the end of its own. Sad. Anywho, the whole thing is a bloody fascinating romp through Japanese culture, SEGA's spirit of adventure, random comings together of pop culture's high and low points, all bound together in a one-of-a-kind, fantastical, crazy idea. And if that's made you want to watch Birdcage of Horrors immediately, well done. There's a hard route or an easy route. The hard route is worth doing, because that's to head on over to Derek's own website at dreamcastforever.com, where you'll find all of his collected works, including the various patches and downloads you'll need to get Birdcage running on Dreamcast, but also including loads of other fantastic stuff. For this, he provides not only the English translation, but also a mod to let you override the need for the VMU saves, so you can watch the whole beautiful saga without transporting yourself back to Japan in 1999, which is nice. But Derek, being the honest fella he is, doesn't host the GDIs that you'll need to watch the episodes, so you would need to download them separately and patch them yourself. Which takes us to the easy route, which is head on over to CD Romance, where you'll find pre-patched GDIs just waiting to be taken home and loved. You will, however, need a GDMU and a big SD card because they're pretty massive, and realistically trying to burn them to disk would be a bloody nightmare. Of course, there is option 3, which is to import the VHS of the original movies, which is pretty cool, but also pretty pointless. And there's the end. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, drop us a like, come back for more on the channel, and we'll see you again on Gaming for Ages.